Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I'm here to help you finish your Christmas shopping list and let everyone else over there stiff-arm their competition while trying to fight off that tryptophan on Turkey Night. Now, what we did was we partnered with Rochester Sports Autographs, the largest JSA authenticated autograph distributor in the United States, where you can get up to 75% off over 30,000 autographed sports collectibles during this holiday season. They have something for everyone. But how is RSA able to offer such great deals on JSA authentication, you ask? Well, they do this by making deals directly with athletes so there are no extra markups, and they choose to then pass that savings on to you, the customer. Now, all orders from Rochester Sports Autographs are top quality and shipped to your door with top authentication and a money-back guarantee. But hurry up because customers are so stark raving mad for RSA that memorabilia sells out daily. All you have to do is head over to shoprsa.com/SHN. Again, that's shoprsa.com/SHN. So don't wait to bring home your favorites and own a piece of sports history for you and the loved ones on your shopping list this holiday season.
We have some breaking news here in the Pigpen with some great information on a brand new book that our friend Timothy P. Brown of Football Archaeology has just released. It's a great book, and I think you'll want to hear about this one because it might make a great Christmas gift for somebody, and maybe that somebody's yourself. Tim will be up here in a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history on a day-to-day basis. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time. So as we come out of the tunnel of the Sports History Network, let's take the field and go no huddle through the portal of positive gridiron history with pigskindispatch.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pigpen, your portal to positive football history. And we are really in the throngs of football history because we have an exciting announcement that's going to be made by one of our friends. Timothy Brown of Football Archaeology is releasing a book, and he is giving us a first shot at talking to him about this book coming out here, and we're really excited about that. Tim Brown, welcome back to the Pigpen.
Hey, Darren. Thank you. Always good to be having a chat with you.
Yeah, and this is an exciting chat because this is, you have a book coming out. We know you've been working on it, and maybe I guess to start off with, what is the title of this book that's out?
Yeah, I changed the title, but it's now Hut Hut Hike, and then it's got the subtitle, A History of Football Terminology.
Okay,
so
that definitely sounds like a football book when you hear Hut Hut Hike. I can't associate those with anything else.
Which was kind of why ultimately we went that direction. So,
was there any certain theme to the book, and what's the book about? What can the listeners expect from it?
Yeah, so the book, kind of why I wrote it. There's kind of two issues. One is kind of content, and the other is style. So the gist of the book is it basically reviews football terminology, from the beginning of the game, and just tries to, I try to determine when certain words or phrases came into the game, and as much as I could tease out why they came into the game. So where did that word come from, or what had changed in the game at that time, to bring out the need for a new word. And so, from a content standpoint, I mean, I like etymology, the study of word origins, and that's there's
hold on, Reader's Digest word alert.
Yeah,
etymology. Oh boy,
yeah, entomology is a study of insects,
okay,
but etymology is words. So anyways, I mean, it's a thing of just, if you go online, there's other people that have written dictionaries of football terminology, and there's a bunch of those online. but as far as I know, no one's ever tried to figure out like when different words came about and why. And so, this is really about the origins of the words, right? And so it's kind of like, just like you think about any words we have in our language, sleet versus snow and beige versus brown, words matter. We use them to distinguish things, right? And so, if a new word enters the game, it probably says something happened in the game to create a need for a word, right? Some tactic change or some equipment change or a rule change. Now you will have those things like Deacon Jones came up with the word sack, and he kind of thought about that term and created the term sack. But before that, everybody called it a dump. If you tackle the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage, it was a dump. Now no one uses that term anymore, but so some terms just kind of pop up for no particular reason other than just some guy creates it.
Hey, but some of those have some very interesting origins, just like you said, with Deacon Jones coming up with that gives it some relevance, and people can relate to that. So that's interesting that you took these football terms and did that. Now, what sort of motivated you to want to write a book like this?
Well, so part of it is just it's a style. I said, there's kind of two parts. One is this, there's content issue about, I like the word origin sort of approach, but it's also a style thing. My first two books are kind of, start at the beginning and end at the end. They're kind of classic histories. You read the thing from start to finish. And while that's great, and, I think that's the proper way to write each of those stories, it requires somebody to read 350 pages of text, right? And so this book is written in what I, kind of think of as a bathroom reader format. So it makes a lot of sense to start at the beginning and end at the end because, some information does build on what was previously discussed. But you can pretty much, each word or term, and there's 416 of them in there, thereabouts. Each of them is written kind of independently. So some of them take less than half a page, some of them may take 2 or 3 pages. But, you can flip through, open up the book, go to page 47 or 122 and just read whatever's there. And, you don't really have to have read what came before it. So it's just kind of an easier to read, easier to digest, take your time going through it. Literally leave it in your bathroom if that's, where you get some reading done. But then it also will serve, I'm going to have an index, at least 2 indices at the back that allow you to kind of look things up topically or just alphabetically. So it can be a reference book too. You're watching a game and somebody says something about the shotgun and you're like, well, where did the shotgun, how did that come about? And, so you can kind of read a little bit just on isolated topics.
Yeah, I can definitely see people getting this as a Christmas gift, and watching football games at the holidays with the family, and one of the announcers, Troy Aikman, says some term, and kids in the background with your book looking up and say, "Hey, Dad, here's where that came from," or somebody.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of a cool thing to do. It's really neat.
Yeah, and it's like my other books. A lot of, especially older stuff, it really helps to see pictures of what it was like or what it was about, or early equipment, those kinds of things. So this I haven't counted them, but there's a lot of illustrations in the book as well, and especially pre 1940s
Oh,
era.
Nice. Now, I know, with having some of these older terms, and you're going way back in time in football, to early football, and right up to the modern days of some of these words coming about. What are some of the challenges that you ran into with researching this book?
Well, I think the biggest challenge I ran into, so the way I ended up doing it, I used books by famous football coaches and some not so famous, so I used a lot of that. And then, but the primary way of doing the research was using newspapers.com and their search function. And so it's a fantastic tool. It's got 800 million newspaper pages available, so lots of data out there. but it's not real good at searching for word strings. So when I wanted to search for 3 yards in a cloud of dust, you kind of have to find ways to kind of get around the limitations of the tool to get there. It also doesn't find synonyms. So if you are looking for, my classic example is blocking sled. If you go in and type in blocking sled, the first time you're going to see that is about 1930 something. But there were, predecessor pieces of equipment called charging machines or blocking machines that showed up about 1900. So if you didn't know that term, you'd think, well, blocking sled showed up in 1930. So, anyways, I've read enough and have enough of the old time knowledge to know that I've picked up most of the terms or predecessor terms. But I'm sure there's some out there that I missed. So and then the other one is just that there are certain terms too, like the word hole, right? The hole or gap is another word in football that's really basic and it's all over the place, but that has so many meanings. I couldn't ever figure out how to tie down when did hole first appear in a newspaper article.
Typing the word hole into newspapers.com, you probably had about all 800 million pages came back.
No, for you. I mean, some of them it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages for some terms, so you have to narrow it down and kind of find the first instances and those kinds of things. So I think the challenges were more like technical. The writing was fairly straightforward just because it's a bunch of mini stories. Each word is its own story, and some of them tie together, and I sequence them so that if we're talking about offensive things or passing game, we'll string those together in the chapters. But each kind of stands on its own. So from an integration standpoint, it's really straightforward.
Yeah. Now, did you find any of the terminology and the results of it surprising to you, or were they all pretty much what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some that I don't know that it's so much a surprise. I mean, there are certainly some things that were surprising to me, but a lot of it's kind of like I kind of compared like taking the approach of looking at football history by looking at certain words is just kind of a different approach. But I kind of compare it to it's like you're driving home from work and you take a different route into your neighborhood and you kind of get a different perspective on your neighborhood. You don't see it the way you normally see it. And so, so for me, like I always knew that passing routes and the passing game was nowhere near as sophisticated back in the teens and 20s and well into the 30s as it is today, right? But but like doing this research kind of reinforced that, just because they're just at least the words that we use today for passing routes, it just didn't exist. There just weren't a lot of names for passing routes, right? I mean, they had the flag or the corner in the 20s, and they had flood passes and button hooks in the 30s. But, there wasn't a whole lot else, And so it just tells you if they didn't even have a word to tell, if you couldn't tell your receiver, go run an X route or a Q route or whatever it is, that, if they didn't even have words to describe the routes, then they probably didn't have those routes. Right.
Yeah. Like Pop Warner probably wasn't at a practice telling everybody to run a wheel route or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, they had plays and they memorized, they typically at that era, they numbered the plays, and that's how, we're going to run a 42. Okay. Run a 42. And if it was a 42 pass, and the guys knew some of the routes, but, even you look at all the coaching books from back then, and they're just these kind of going out into an area. And it's not real sophisticated. There's not a lot of change of direction in the routes. It's pretty straightforward stuff.
All right, now I was honored by you let me read a copy of the book, and I really appreciate that. And it's a great book. And I was wondering if maybe you could share a couple of samples of what you've written. Maybe give us some of the history on a couple words that I found be really kind of interesting.
Sure, sure.
All right. Well,
So name one.
okay. Well, one that I found really interesting and I learned a lot from it was the word red shirt.
Yeah. So that one's that's a fun story for me. So the earliest I found of the word red shirt being used was 1917 at Cornell, and it literally meant that they're one of the other words that we talk about in the book is scrub, it's or scout team. It's those kinds of guys. So Cornell had their scrubs wear red shirts, literally red shirts for practice, and their varsity guys apparently wore white. And so that's where it first comes up, and then you start seeing red shirt appearing. Now Cornell is the big red, so wearing a red shirt makes sense, but you start seeing a red shirt as a description even of the scrub team at other schools, and they don't even have red as one of their school colors. So that starts popping up for a bit, and so so red shirts just there in the background is kind of a name for the scout team sort of guys. And in the South, a lot of times they call those guys bohunks. But in at Nebraska in mid 30s, there was a guy, player on the team who wanted to. He hadn't played in the first 5-6 games, so he approached the coaches and just said, "Can you make sure you don't let me go play? Let me spend the rest of the season with the red shirts because I don't want to get put into a game late in the game, late in the season, and basically blow away a year of my eligibility." And so they said, okay. And they put him down to the red shirt team. And so then that's where the practice of what we call red shirting came from. It's this guy who got put on the red shirt team instead of staying on varsity to preserve his year of eligibility. And so it turned out that the guy ended up, he was an All-American as a senior. So it was probably, and he played on there, in the 41 Rose Bowl for Stanford. So, good choice for Nebraska, I should say, against Stanford. But so good choice on that guy's part. So, it's just kind of a cool little story of where this really practical physical term transitioned into, more of a conceptual eligibility related term.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know that there's a synonym, a one word synonym to red shirt, to describe that what happens there with a guy being put off to the side and keeping that year of eligibility without playing. Red shirt's the only word I know for it, and it's just kind of cool. It was convenient and they took it and it was adopted as that name. So that's really neat. And I love the history and the origin story that you did on that. That's really great.
And I think I ended up. So a lot of times in the book's organized by decade, but sometimes it just makes sense to string some words together, right? In one section, just for readability. And I think in that section I also cover walk on, which didn't show up until the early '60s, but it was similar kind of thing. There's a little origin story there that's just kind of fun little tidbit.
Yeah, it definitely is. Now, I guess another one of my favorites, and I must be seeing red because this one has the color red in it also, and it's a red dog. How that term came about.
Yeah. Now, do you remember anybody using the term red dog when you were younger?
Oh yeah. We used it in junior high, and we were playing street football and things as kids. Sandlot football. We would always say, "Hey, no red dogs allowed." We very seldom called it a blitz. It was called red dog when we were kids.
Okay, yeah. So for me, there was a woman who sat up in the stands in our grade school football team who was always yelling "red dog, red dog," and it was only later on that I really understood what that meant. But so so anybody who doesn't know, Red Dog is what we now call Blitz. And so it was, so I kind of talk about both stories, at both Blitz and Red Dog at the same time in that portion of the book. But so there were people, there were teams sent linebackers prior to the origin of the term Red Dog. And I think people sometimes they use the term dog or dogging, kind of the way we would use the term stunt. And sometimes it's unclear whether it was just those were like tackle stunts or whether they were linebacker stunts. But dogging was a form of a stunt. And so then there was this guy who came out of Kansas. He played basketball for Kansas, so he's pretty good athlete. But he played football as well, and his nickname was Red. And he gets drafted by the Giants, signs with them, and as a rookie has a really good season. And they start using him to dog, dog the quarterback and rush the quarterback. So that's how that term, then it became Red Dog. Kind of, they combined, his name and the dogging concept. And so that stuck around really, Red Dog, from a newspaper standpoint, it stuck around into the probably mid 60s. And I'm sure it got mentioned after that. But really probably starting mid 50s, Blitz really kind of started taking over. It popped up, late 40s, but it, by the mid 50s, probably most people are talking about blitzes. But that's one of those things too. It's like, football is really tribal, and so if you come out of the New York Giants tribe or the Green Bay Packers tribe, or, think about college, coaching trees and families. I think a lot of terminology just followed families, the coaching families as much as anything.
Yeah, I think that's probably definitely true. And, probably I think nowadays, or well, probably the last 50, 60 years with television being so evident and the color commentators, most of them are ex-football players, and whatever system they grew up in that family, they're bringing some of those terms over into our modern day terms, and we adopt them because that's what we hear on television. And
Yeah,
sounds good. We want to be saying what Tony Romo's saying, or John Matt, or whoever. So
yeah,
good stuff.
And that's actually one little point about the book is just, I used newspapers because, number one, it leaves a paper trail. They have left a paper trail. And the newspapers have been around since the start of football. Television and radio haven't. So, and I think there's probably a pretty good transfer between the media, but there are certainly some words that get used more on television and really don't show up too much in writing, or at least nowhere near as much.
All right. Now, let's say you meet somebody, you're the author of this book, and you have 5 minutes to tell a stranger about this book. What's a great example that you would choose out of your book to tell somebody about that doesn't know much about the book to make them show some interest in it?
Well, yeah, this may, I don't know if this is going to convince anybody else to read it, but this is a story that I like. So one of the things that, pretty much it's a football thing, but, we use it in a lot of other places now, and it's X's and O's, right? This guy really knows his X's and O's, or, however, the term gets used. And so I was
we're not talking about the X's and O's your wife puts on after, have a nice lunch, dear, and sticks in your lunchbox.
No, never. No, instead, I'm talking about football X's and O's. Okay. And that first shows up. I should have, confirmed it. But so that shows up, I'm going to say in the 40s, right? And so I was like, okay, well, why did we say X's and O's? And obviously the assumption is that it's because of the, drawing plays and coaches drawing plays and using X's and O's. So I said, okay, well, let me look around and see if I can figure out who first started using X's and O's. And as I went back and, I've got a bookshelf full of old, football, coaches' books. And it's like, okay, well, no X's, no O, there's either all O's or triangles or something, So I did find Charles Daly, who had published a book in 1919. He used X's and O's, but like, Stagg and those guys, they all had used like little people figures in a lot of those, those old books. Camp did the same thing. And so, the vast majority of all of the books published, there's no X's and O's. I mean, there might be X's or there might be O's, especially O's. So first, it's one of those things for me. It's kind of like a mystery, that I think the reason that they ended up using X's and O's is newspaper reporters and stuff started reporting on it, is because, when coaches are informally drawing or they're given a chalk talk, or they're, just doodling or explaining something to a player, then they'll use like X's and O's because it's a kind of quick, easy way to draw, the lineups. But in more formal publishing circles, or when there are plays drawn up in newspaper illustrations, which there used to be a lot more of, they tend to be a little bit more formal about it, filled in O's or blank O's or whatever. So anyways, I just think it's kind of a cool, that's one where the mystery's still out there, exactly why they did X's and O's. But, the book has a bunch of examples of different versions of coaches drawing up plays, and, just kind of interesting to look at.
Now, I think we had the opportunity on an episode that hasn't aired yet, but the one that you and I were discussing on a Rose Bowl topic that ended up making a book, and it was kind of cool that I got to see how your mind worked, and you went on this research bend, and that was another name for the Rose Bowl. And we won't get into too much detail because we have it in a future episode, but Tim and I were having a conversation about the Rose Bowl, and I posed the question. I said, hey, where did the term granddaddy of them all come from? Was that something that Keith Jackson made up? And we both sort of scratched our head a little bit, and we're milling around. And Tim went right to work as soon as we hung up the phone call for that recording. And a couple of days later, he had some things that he researched and came up. So it's just great how your mind works and how you research things. And I thought that was kind of a cool example that it got published in the book. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, well, and it's, one of the things that happened to me a bunch as I was writing this is like I'm watching a game and somebody uses a term. It's like, oh God, I haven't researched that one. So as I've been reading and listening and watching, I've really made it a point to jot down terms that maybe deserve to be in there. Some of which, as I said, some words just prove difficult to track down, or frankly, once I tracked them down, there wasn't much there. So I've left them off, but maybe they'll be book 2 of like.
So how long was this process to write the book? I mean, when you said, okay, I'm writing a book with using words and terminology from football and doing the origin stories on it, and you started writing them down, how long was that till you had wrote your last exclamation point or punctuation in the book?
Yeah, so it wasn't as long as the other 2 books probably took about year and a half to 2 years each. This was more of a 6-7 month process, and part of it is just because I kind of, as I go along, I've got a system for keeping notes and images, and I kind of catalog things if I research something, I don't just throw it away. I've got a way of maintaining that information. So in many cases, I had already done some research on, I'd probably done a fair amount of research on a lot of these terms, but I hadn't approached it from the standpoint of when did this term first appear. So I already, in most cases, I had a pretty good idea of when it came along, And so it really was a matter of refreshing a lot of information for a particular purpose, which made it easier. If I was starting just totally from scratch, it would have been a lot longer. And I'm also just, I'm smarter now about, I've got all the old rule books. I've got these other coaching books, and I know where to search, and I'm pretty good at doing you know, as much as I commented earlier about the search engine and the challenges there, I'm pretty good at it, so it went, fairly quick, and I finished researching something, and then I write it up and then move on to the next one.
Oh, interesting. I think this book is so unique because I don't know of any other football related book where somebody that knows nothing about football could find some enjoyment because they're going to learn a lot about the game by reading it, right up to people that are, experts and know everything. They can sit down and look at it and probably pick up something that they didn't know or something they didn't remember maybe. And it's just so such a wide array of people that this book could relate to, and could people that could enjoy it. I think that's really neat the way you did that, and I applaud you for that.
Yeah, I think, I mean, some of the language maybe certain kids would have trouble with, but I mean, I think it's something, pretty young kids could enjoy it. Not like a second grader, but a junior high kid or something like that.
Well,
but
I'm thinking about somebody's, maybe somebody's wife not really into football. They see their husband
yeah,
really enjoys football and say, I'm going to learn a little bit more about this game. And, so I buy the book on the side and read it up. And so they can have a conversation with their loved one, over dinner or whatever. Just, I think
well,
that could really happen with this book.
yeah. And, but the other is that thing where it's just sitting there, next to your favorite chair or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, I never thought of it. What about this word, and boom. So you hear somebody talk about it, like Monday morning quarterback. Okay, well, that's in there, right? I mean, so it's a pretty wide range of terms, and it's not real deep. It's a lot of them are words that started off as coach speak technical terms, but they're all things that you hear every day. I mean, there's a few that are a little bit more obscure, but 95% or more are words you hear every weekend. So yeah, so hopefully people get a kick out of it, and I mean, I learned a lot, doing it. So, and I know more about football history than the average bear, but I learned a lot. It was fun.
Yeah,
Fun putting
I
it together.
did too. I mean, I took a lot out of that book, and it's probably worth a good couple rereads here over the next year or so because it's really that good. I guess the important question is now we've been telling them about this book here for a little bit. Maybe tell them again what the title is and where they can pick up a copy at.
Yeah, so the title is Hut Hut Hike with the subtitle of A History of Football Terminology. The book is available on Amazon. Type in Hut Hut Hike with exclamation points. I hadn't thought about that. Make it a little harder to find, but you can also put, Timothy P. Brown, and so I've got a couple other books out there. So or football history, it'll probably pop up that way. But Hut Hut Hike with exclamation points after each of the words. It's going to be it's available in print form and as paperback, and then e-reader. And if you happen to be somebody who uses Amazon Unlimited, the book's available for free that way. So it's going to be out there, and then I'll also be putting, announced it on my website and on Twitter, etc. So, hopefully, and I'll have, there's links in those things. So if you find those links, then that's another way to access it.
Okay, and we'll put a link in the show notes of this podcast, listeners, so you can go that route too. Or Pigskin Dispatch or footballarchaeology.com. All great ways to get there too. So many options to get to the same place. The route through the neighborhood you're talking about, you can get home a different way. So Tim, do you have any last words before we let you go on this?
If you're somebody who enjoys kind of understanding kind of how things develop and kind of how certain words in particular come about, then I think you'd really enjoy the book. But, it's also just, I think there's a lot of just pure football history that comes along in the book. And so if you haven't read a kind of an easy to read book on football history, then I think this is probably a good one.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, Timothy P. Brown, author, historian, just about everything with football history, and a new book, Hike. Make sure you get a copy on Amazon and some of those other avenues we told you how to get to Amazon to get it. And make sure you get a copy. Make a great Christmas gift for loved ones like football, or somebody wants to learn about football. And so get a couple copies and wrap them up Christmas time. So, Tim Brown, thanks a lot for joining us and letting us talk about this book you have coming out.
Hey, very good, Darren. I appreciate it once again, and it's getting closer, so you have a wonderful Christmas as we approach.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.